What is going on, everyone? Welcome to episode 2 of the Rectify Roundtable. This episode is a little bit different than a normal format, as in the first episode we had talked about a lot of different topics, but this one is an interview-exclusive episode with Peter McConnell, who is a music composer in the video game industry, working on several different games like the Psychonauts series, older Indiana Jones games, and most recently, he's worked on Goblin Stone, which is a brand new indie game, and we talk about that game and his overall experience working in the industry as a music composer, which is quite interesting. We touch on a lot of different topics. One of them is about like AI and music, kind of talk about are we scared of AI when it comes to making music in video game industry, and a lot of other things. We kind of go deep in a lot of different things there. But I hope you guys enjoy this interview. And before I go, and before we transition, please make sure to subscribe to the Rectify Gaming YouTube channel. Make sure to comment below and let us know what interviews you'd like to see on this channel. And if you want to know Peter McConnell and want to follow him and look at his history, you can see that in the description below. And with that, enjoy the interview. Ladies and gentlemen, we have another special guest on the Rectify Roundtable podcast. He has composed many music for a wide variety of games, from Sly Cooper to Hearthstone and to most recently Goblin Stones. Peter McConnell, how are you doing?
Doing great, Tyler. Thanks for having me.
Oh, anytime. Thanks for taking your time out here and doing this interview. So to start things off, I kind of want to know the background, how you got started doing music for games, because I assume maybe in the 90s or like the 80s that, making music for games didn't really seem that much of like a true thing.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
So I got into it sort of by happenstance somewhat. I was coming from the Boston area out to California, and I was going to start a band with a fellow named Michael Land, who ended up really kind of heading and starting the audio department for LucasArts, which in those days was called Lucasfilm Games. And he sort of got this kind of dream job, really, while I was on my way out west. And by the time I got out west, it was kind of like, well, the band thing kind of fell by the wayside a little bit.
Yeah.
But here was this opportunity because he needed some work. He needed some help. Working on the new audio system that Lucasfilm Games was developing. So I was brought in to work on that audio system because I had a background in audio engineering, and just very briefly, I went to college originally as a physics major at Harvard, and I kind of found that it wasn't for me, and I switched over to music. But once I graduated, after a good long time, I found that there wasn't a whole lot of employment for a music diploma.
Right.
But I could code, having had math background and physics background and so on. And I got a job working at a company called Lexicon, which still makes black boxes musicians play their instruments through. And so I got a lot of experience doing audio engineering from that. But at my heart, I really had kind of made the decision in college that I was going to be a musician. So
Right.
This opportunity came up at LucasArts to work on this new system. And it was kind of ideal because it represented the opportunity to build something that hadn't been done before, basically interactive or adaptive music system. And also the opportunity to actually drive the sports car after we built it, if you will.
Yeah.
So that's how I got started. I was mostly, about probably the first, for the first little while, I was about half a coder and code designer and half a musician there. And as the years went on, I sort of moved over to doing more musical stuff. And in 2000, I left the company. About the same time, Tim Schafer left the company. He's the fellow who...
That's the legendary
yes,
Tim Schafer from Double Fine, right?
Probably most people in the audience know who he is, yes. He I started working with him on something called Day of the Tentacle, and he was one of the programmers on that. And then his first project was a game called Full Throttle, and after that came Grim
Right.
Fandango. And so really ever since the very first project Tim did, I've been very fortunate to work on all of his games. And so that's kind of how it all came together. In 2000, Tim went out and started Double Fine. I went out and started a somewhat ill-fated internet venture with Michael, and at the same time started composing independently. And that's sort of since then I've done a bunch of scores for fairly for a few number of titles.
It always feels like a small world sometimes in the world of gaming because, like, Tim Schafer is a legend, like a kind of like an underrated person in the industry with the Psychonauts series, right? And you've worked on the Psychonauts series along with Sly Cooper and all things like that. And I'm assuming your connection with Lucasfilm kind of got you into doing the Star Wars games that you worked on, right?
Yeah, well, when we were all working at Lucasfilm Games, which later became LucasArts,
Right.
Certainly a big part of it was doing Star Wars games, and that was actually really great sort of school for me, because I was the guy who did a lot of the editing of John Williams music. And I learned so much about music for picture by, all this work of taking those existing scores and making them fit different pictures. So that was a nice bit of training, really, in the art of scoring for picture.
Nice. And kind of to explain your role as a music composer, not many people that play games don't necessarily know a lot about music composing. They listen to the music, but kind of like, what is your role as a music composer for those that don't know?
Oh, that's
interesting. It's
yeah, and it's really a similar, although there's differences in how you do it. It's really a similar role to what you do in movies and TV. So the music is there. Music is there to provide emotion beyond what's on the screen, and really all the sound is. And that's one thing I learned working at LucasArts, was that how important the sound design is as well in terms of generating emotion, and how the music needs to fit in with the sound design. And that's a big part of Star Wars, the Star Wars movies, by the way, is how that sound design works. Those were really pioneering films in the world of sound design. So the job of the musician.
Are you kind of like the leader in some ways? Like,
Really, it has.
Like, are you the boss? Like, calls the shots, or are you kind of like? Sorry.
Well, I do have, with Tim Schafer's games, I do have a fair amount of leeway, and probably a little more than in a lot of situations. But and this was also true of Goblin Stone. I had a lot of leeway there, just kind of coming up with stuff.
Right.
But in general, the way it works is you are given a scene or situation that you're going to score, and usually the director has an idea of how they would like it to go. In movies, there's actually a music editor who may even edit in temp music before the composer comes to the table and then creates the music that's actually going to be in the scene. So in that and this is also true in games. I will get a QuickTime movie that's got a level gameplay in it, or perhaps a cutscene, and there will be music cut in that the game designers or director or might have thought would be a good point of departure. So as a kind of example of this from the movie world, I have been told by fairly good authority, the opening scene in A New Hope, right? Star Wars: A New Hope, the first movie, the fourth in the series. that opening scene with the Star Destroyer chase, the temp music that was put in there was Mars, God of War from Holst the Planets. And if you listen to what John Williams did, it is absolutely not a ripoff of Mars, God of War, but you can see that it's doing a very similar thing emotionally.
Right.
That's kind of an ideal example, you might say, of how that might work. So you might be given that, I would call that fairly explicit instructions on how to score a scene, and you might be given instructions that are that explicit. You might also just be given, hey, run wild with it. Here's a situation. Give me some music. I want it to be happy. I want it to be funny. I want it to be
Right.
evil. Whatever.
Yeah, it's kind of like a question I sometimes have of voice actors. Like, can you kind of freelance it a little bit, or they want you to do a certain thing a certain way? It's kind of like the same thing with music, almost, right?
Yes, it is. It
Yeah.
varies very much between teams, between project leads. It's I've encountered all sorts of levels of sort of supervision, you might say, and they all work for me.
Nice. So you mentioned earlier about Goblin Stone. That's one of the latest games from Orc Chop Games, and one of your latest projects. And this game received a lot of positive reviews from what I saw, and a lot of nominations. Can you just tell us, what it was like to work with Goblin Stone, which seemed like a much smaller title than working on like the Sly Cooper franchise or Hearthstone, like we've talked about. Kind of like what was that experience like?
It's a small indie game, but it has it's incredibly artistic. When I saw the art and heard also, they got an incredible announcer for I can't remember the fellow's name, but he is just fantastic, the voiceover guy. And so even though this is a very simple game, it's just a scrolling two-dimensional scene, and you get in these different situations, right? The story is so charming, and the voiceover is so sort of big and dramatic. It's like Orson Welles. He's like this incredible, it injects all this sort of epic quality right into, and the art is just absolutely gorgeous. Like you have, I mean, if you just look at it, you'll go, oh, okay, well, that's high quality, right? And so to me, I think that often the most interesting stuff is something that's either done by an indie game company, or something that's kind of done on a whim by a big game company. It's just, oh, well, let's try this thing, right? I think you can find a lot. The indie world is really where all the interesting new ideas come up, I think.
Yeah, and there's
many
definitely. Yeah, I'm sure you've seen a ton of indie games, and maybe you've gotten like offers for other indie games. I don't know, but yeah, there's a lot of creativity within indie developers, and there's a lot of passion I notice from what we do and do our reviews and things like that. And I love it. So obviously, Peter, you have like a long list of like games you've done music for, right? And
Yes.
one of the ones that intrigued me when I was looking at the list were the Connect games and like Connectimals and all things like that. Like just like when something comes up like that, like when these game opportunities come up, do they come to you? And another thing is, did you ever play like Xbox Connect and all that, or you just
I played a little bit of Xbox, but I didn't actually have one. They were hard to come by when we were actually working on the game. But I played one over at a neighbor's house. Those Connect games. Well, Connectimals and Connect Disney Adventures. They were very family oriented, which was something that I just appreciate working on. I had little kids at the time. They're teenagers now, but and then they were little guys running around and playing Peter Pan and that sort of thing. And it just felt so good to be making something for the whole family. And in answer to your question about how did that come across, I actually don't remember how generally
It's been
I've
a
been
while,
lucky
but
that people have come to me for help for work. So I get a call and I get a call and I say
yeah.
yes.
You mentioned like Tim Schafer and Michael Land right before. Would you say those are among the most influential people in your career that helped you get to where you are today?
Yeah, I would have to say that. Yeah, both those guys. You know, I mean, Michael sort of brought me into the industry, period, and Tim has been really my, he's been. I've scored his games for whatever it is, 34 years or something, a lot of years. So yeah, they're pretty powerful influences. And Michael was
Nice. That's good.
he was my housemate in college.
Is it safe to say that Tim has not reached out to you for a Psychonauts 3?
Oh, if he had, I wouldn't say.
That's okay. I tried, everyone. I tried.
Yeah.
That's okay.
I mean, I'm always working on stuff with Double Fine, but yeah, I can't really. We'll leave it to them to say what it is.
Yeah. And you recently did Return to Monkey Island, right? Because you worked on the
Yeah.
other ones.
Mm-hmm.
That's another one, right? That was a big surprise when that first got announced. Return to Monkey Island. I was
Yes, it was
kind of surprised by that. Yeah, that was a good one. So I know you've also had experience on the Indiana Jones games, like past ones, right? The Indiana Jones and the Great Circle is coming out this year. Are you looking forward to that, or do you know that one's coming out, right?
Well, really, I just worked on what was it called? In what we called Indy 4.
Right.
The Fate of Atlantis. And I didn't work on any after that. Clint Bajakian, one of my colleagues at LucasArts, scored a later indie title right around 2000 or 2001. Oh shoot, I'm blanking on the name, but it was a wonderful score, really cool score, and Indian Emperor's Tomb or something like that. Anyway, it was a big full orchestral score recorded in Seattle, I think. But yeah, I didn't have anything to do with that. It's just
okay,
just Indy 4.
Okay, and the with Fate of Atlantis, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
where that was
Atlantis.
that was it. Okay. So as a music composer, do you see kind of like the progress of a game in development, or do they give you like a certain setting where you have to make, a certain, something for, you know what I mean?
It's best to come in as early as possible in a project, although that isn't always what happens. I like it when I have, if it's a fairly big title, I like it when, I have, at least a couple years before it's going to hit the shelves, and ideally, 6 to 9 months before you really have to do music production, because you want to go through a phase, if possible, of trying out themes. So
Right.
for a larger title like that, you want to have a chance for those things to kind of settle in, because a given theme is going to be used in a lot of situations in the game. So it needs to carry a lot on its shoulders. So I'm a very much of a melody guy, and what I will do is I keep my iPhone handy. It used to be a handheld cassette player.
Oh,
and that was back in the Grim
back in the
Fandango
day.
That was all done on handheld cassette. But hum into the iPhone, and then the next day, maybe see, does the melody still hold weight? When you listen to it. The big risk there is when you play it back, you can't tell what you sang. That's happened more than once, but most of the time I can kind of figure it out, and that's kind of step one. And then you'll sort of then I might do sort of like a little piano mock-up and send it to the project lead and or the team,
Right.
Sometimes there's more than one person who needs to review things. And then you do sort of a full-fledged, what's called a MIDI mock-up, which is basically something with sampled instruments. And then the final stage is to actually record live musicians, if it's the type of music that involves live musicians, which is what I tend to do.
Nice. And kind of to piggyback on it, do you use anything like for inspiration to get you going, or no? Like
That
kind
will,
of like
my main, besides reference material that I may or may not be given by the project.
right.
Now, for
Like are
example,
there other
for
other
Goblin
oh
Stone,
sorry.
Vince McConnell me some reference pieces of sort of other kind of fantasy games, and I listened to those before I started to write any music. So sometimes you will get a that kind of guidance. Other times you might not. And for me, whether or not I get reference pieces in the beginning, the art is a huge motivator for me. So I always, when I'm composing for a game, I always, like, pretty much never don't have a great big picture of art on my main screen. You can see back there with this. There's my sort of, got my main screen up there. It's got the little devil guy on it. That's where that's where the movie goes that I'm scoring, right? Or the gameplay material.
Mm-hmm.
And that screen always has something on it for me to just constantly look at. And I
can understand
am I vibing on that scene? Am I vibing on that character? It's extremely intuitive and driven by what I'm seeing in the moment and how that makes me feel, and then what I'm hearing, and does it make me feel the same way?
Right. So another thing is that I'm sure you've worked on multiple different pieces for games, maybe that no one ever knows about or ever heard. Has there ever been a time where you like something you made so much where they just got denied, saying that, well, we're not going to use this? I'm assuming there's stuff like that, right?
I've actually, I've had pieces rejected. That's pretty
Right.
rare, to be honest with you. I can't say honestly that I've had anything rejected that at the end of the day I didn't think should be rejected from that situation. So, like,
Right.
when I find is that if you're working with a good team, they know, as a composer, they know the game better than you do. So if they don't like it, odds are 99% that they're right and you're wrong.
Right.
And so I'm not going to say I don't have thin skin, or because I think every composer's got thin skin a little bit, but I have profound respect for the actual team that I'm working with, and I have yet, in 30 plus years of doing this, I've yet to run into a situation where at the end of the day, if there were notes or corrections that were made to the piece, I didn't go, you know what, they were right about that. This works a lot better. So it's really, it's not that I don't see myself as an artist, because I do. But part of the art involves really, really understanding what you're scoring. So to really do that, you need to respect who you're working with. And like I said, maybe it'll happen someday, but have I had pieces that didn't see the light of day and I really wish they had? Yes, absolutely. But those were in situations where the products got canceled. So
yeah, that's also another thing. That's a good point. Like same thing with like voice actors or even anyone who's worked on that game. That just stinks. And we see that a lot more lately with like a lot of the layoffs and a lot of cancellation of games lately. So I have one last question. It's kind of interesting because I know it's been a topic that's been coming up like a lot in just the world of like working and things like that. As someone who's a musician, music composer, and does it as a job, does AI scare you? Kind of. I don't know if you don't want to answer that. You don't have to. Like, as you don't
great
think.
question.
Does that ever scare you? Kind of.
I think well, yeah, it does, but on a level that far surpasses and exceeds my little world. Um,
Right.
you know,
And
I just think, you know, will AI write compelling music? Yeah, probably at some point it will. Compelling to
yeah,
some people,
because we
and
see it with cover arts and games and stuff. People are doing it, and I'm like, I don't like that personally.
yeah, well, and the artists are really fighting this war first. The musicians will be later.
Right.
But I think what people are seeing is there's a sort of a glitzy one dimensionality to the AI generated art that when you see enough of it, you go, there it is again, great.
Exactly. Yeah.
So and I think the more interesting question is, I mean, as AI gets better and better, right? Um, then then essentially all it really is going to be is a really good plagiarist, and that gets into sort of legal issues
Because you're
with where the
taking,
yeah.
yeah, you're taking from media that's already existing,
So I do think there's actually
basically.
a legal buffer that is rising up to sort of head off some of the encroachments of AI at the pass, if you will.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that could the music world is already rife with copying and plagiarism and lawsuits that are attached there too. And I think a lot of and I do see. I mean, I have seen that there are services that will provide you, say, AI generated heavy metal, which I thought
Wow.
would be hard to do, but it actually they do a fairly creditable job. But at the end of the day, it's the same issue that uh, that it's glitzy and impressive if you're not paying attention. If you are, I mean, it's you can feel it pretty quickly. I think, especially if you're a heavy metal fan.
Yeah.
That's just one example. I know there will be others, and this will just continue to be a thing, and it'll find its place in our creative world. But I do think that place is going to be somewhat circumscribed by legality.
Yeah, that's a good point, and I totally believe you. I think musicians in general, whether it's for gaming or just regular musicians, I feel like they deserve more as far as compensation for their work because, like,
Yeah,
we have these Spotify and things like that. I'm sure, as a musician yourself, you see people get free music all the time, but then the musicians aren't necessarily compensated the way they should be, and
right.
usually they make money off of like tours and things like that. So,
Yeah,
I think I always find it interesting when it comes to music composers and people who work, on music, just like regular band stuff or things like that. So, I really appreciate taking your time.
oh, you're very welcome. Thanks
D-
for having me.
No problem. Once again, I would like to thank Peter for joining us for an interview talking about the industry and music and all those types of things. I hope you guys enjoy the interview as well, and stay tuned for Rectify Roundtable Episode 3. We're going to talk about a lot of news topics happening around Microsoft, Nintendo, Sony, a lot of things happening around the industry, and that episode is coming really soon. Once again, everyone, make sure to subscribe, and I will see you guys next time.